Hello, this is Timon. What is money? That's the question, and I'd like to think it through with you in this video. Whether people have studied economics or not, they all get stuck in a material-centered mindset, even though in school they clearly learn about monetary and financial theory, that money is essentially a ledger. They forget that fact. They forget that currency is a ledger and instead cling to what they can touch, always chasing the tangible. That's why they keep saying nonsense. How could Bitcoin possibly be money, they say. That's how they think. But the money supply is tied to the liabilities on a central bank's balance sheet. Don't forget that. But in reality, as I studied Bitcoin and monetary theory, I began to wrestle with questions that almost no one talks about. And I arrived at a conclusion. Money isn't only the debt of central banks. At its core, money currency essentially represents credit, and that credit is fundamentally a ledger. And at its root, it's debt. So I want you to reflect on this with me, to think it through together. Take the Evergrande crisis, as it's called. A Chinese real estate company goes bankrupt. When it collapses, it defaults. But why does that matter to you? If it goes under, do you personally hold Evergrande bonds? Did you buy an apartment Evergrande built? No, you don't, right? Yet the whole world pays attention to the Evergrande crisis, and the global macroeconomy reacts to it. People start making moves, selling stocks, buying stocks. Why is that? Because from a global perspective, the Evergrande crisis affects the money supply. You might think this sounds far-fetched, and even experts might criticize me, but it's true. The Evergrande crisis impacts global money supply. Why? Because the crisis undermines global credit, and credit is essentially money supply. So the Evergrande crisis affects the global money supply, and money is the unit of account for everything we trade. So when the supply shifts, all prices change. Let me put it simply. From here, I'll walk you through some bold steps in my reasoning. Follow along, it's quite interesting. Think about this. Imagine a society where everything runs on credit. What does that mean? Besides how you choose to define it, I'll give you my definition. Stay with me. Picture credit being 100%. It's complete credit. Here's what that looks like. Back in the day, you go to a corner store and buy a pack of ramen, but because credit is 100%, you don't pay cash. That ramen purchase is written down by the shop owner, ramen, Timon, added to the ledger. For the shop, that's an asset. For me, it's a liability. I owe them for the ramen, but I haven't paid yet. Because credit is 100%, I can take the ramen without handing over money, just walking away with it. No money moves. The only thing that moves, the ramen comes to me, but nothing goes back from me to the shop. Because credit is at 100%, only the ledger changes. Ownership of the ramen changes hands, and in the shop's ledger, and in mine, entries are updated. Now the Evergrande crisis happens. Evergrande can't cover the bonds coming due. It's on the verge of default. But imagine credit is at 100%. That's why I bring up China, because the system is highly credit-driven. So with 100% credit, Evergrande's bonds just get rolled over. Evergrande's bonds get rolled over. Now, there are banks that were supposed to receive money from Evergrande so they could pay wages. Or maybe raw material companies waiting for payments from Evergrande so they could pay their workers, like steel or cement suppliers. Let's say a cement company. The cement company's receivables. Those too get rolled over. So let's stick with the cement example. Say, a concrete company. This concrete firm was supposed to collect payment from Evergrande on its bond and then use that cash to pay wages and cover rent, like their office lease, for example. But in a full credit system, here's what happens. They don't pay wages. No wages and no rent as well. Because remember, credit is absolute. So what do the employees of that concrete company do? They don't get their salaries. They'll get it later, even without wages now. They can still go buy ramen at the supermarket. And when they do, they don't pay cash. The supermarket just writes it down in the ledger, and ownership of the ramen shifts to them. Because credit is absolute. The shopkeeper also knows that eventually they'll get paid back. So they hand me the ramen and record it in the ledger. For me, the wages I'm owed from the concrete company where I work get recorded as an asset on my books. I don't actually get cash, but I go to the supermarket, buy ramen, and it gets recorded as my debt. Later, when I get paid, I just settle that debt. And the supermarket knows that eventually Evergrande will make money, pay the concrete company, which will then pay wages to its workers. And when those wages are paid, the supermarket will get the ramen money back. Since credit is at 100%, they're fine just giving me the ramen. Now, when the supermarket brings in ramen from the ramen company, They don't pay cash. They just take the ramen because credit is absolute. They just take the goods and the ramen company just supplies them. The ramen company records the receivable from the supermarket as an asset, while the supermarket records the ramen it took as a liability. So all these economic players now hold assets and liabilities, and the ramen company needs to buy flour. When they buy flour, they also buy it on credit. And the flour supplier knows the ramen company will get money from the supermarket, which will get money from the concrete company's workers, who will eventually pay up, and the concrete company will get money from Evergrande. So everyone just records it in their ledgers. In a society with 100% credit, no cash is needed at all. It may feel like a bold leap in thinking, but trust me, in a society of full credit, there are no defaults and no cash is needed. It's a complete utopia. A utopia of credit. When you extend the hypothesis this boldly, you start to rethink what money actually is from a whole new angle. And you'll gain some new insight into it. So what is money really? What the Federal Reserve did during COVID. That was basically a society running on 100% credit. At first glance, it looks like the opposite. They were printing money like crazy. The central bank pumping it out and distributing it to economic players. But what I'm describing is different. No money actually circulates. Only the ledgers change. Debts increase. Just as the central bank's assets expand, our debts expand. Because balance sheets must balance. Assets increase too. The ramen shop, for instance, sells noodles on credit, so its receivables, its claims, pile up as assets. And since it bought flour on credit, the flour costs stack up as liabilities. So in any society, whether it's one nation or the entire globe, debts grow enormously. And when every economic actor settles at one point, repayments can cascade everywhere at once. It doesn't even need to happen in sequence. In a metaverse context, if all the ledgers are unified, it could be settled instantly. Could it really be solved? In this utopian world of 100% credit, you could wipe the debt ledgers clean in one go. Just print the money and instantly everything gets settled in a chain. If that's really how the economy worked, if it functioned this way, it would be chaotic. Why chaotic? Because money, at first glance, already looks like credit. But if credit were truly 100%, then money wouldn't be needed at all. You may not agree, but it's the logical conclusion. All you'd need to do is update the ledgers, if credit is absolute. And so we arrive at the true essence of money. So the essence of money isn't credit. The essence of money is selection, distinction, choice. That's the conclusion we arrive at. But why do we end up with that conclusion? Because in this utopia of full credit, nothing really works. But nothing really fails either, does it? You could walk into any store, take something, buy goods, and ownership just transfers to you. All you need to do is record it as debt. Because someday it'll be settled. You do your work, but don't get paid right away. The fact that you worked means the wages you're owed get booked as your asset, but you haven't received cash. So you're living on piles of credit because you know you're owed money. In a 100% credit world, there's no default. But here's why such an economy doesn't function. Look at the Federal Reserve in the US and the Chinese government facing the Evergrande crisis, a socialist system. All of them operate as if defaults don't exist, as if money can be printed and supplied without limit. But in reality, money isn't really money. It's just changes in ledgers. That's the assumption being made. I'm not joking. This is really the way we might already be imagining things to work. So what's missing? Why does this society eventually collapse? If it doesn't collapse, that would be strange. Because selection doesn't happen because there's no filtering. When things work like this, the most essential function of the economy choice doesn't take place, right? Because there's no bankruptcy. So when you buy something, there are no constraints. So you can just buy anything. Put simply, Evergrande gets paid for apartments, pays the concrete company. The concrete company gets paid, pays salaries and employees with their wages, go to the supermarket, pay for ramen. The supermarket pays the ramen company pays the flour mill. And the whole cycle completes in one go. So the growth of debt itself isn't the essence. It gets resolved. The real issue is that as debt expands, reckless production happens, resources are misallocated, and that's why communism collapsed. So today I've shared with you something that may have sounded a bit outrageous. Money isn't paper. It's the liability of a central bank, but not just that. It's also the liabilities of every economic actor. What we call credit today is in fact what functions as money. In a 100% credit society, there's no bankruptcy and no money. Money isn't even needed. And how are we approximating that today? By the Fed massively expanding its assets, propping up companies that would otherwise fail. We are, in practice, approaching this credit utopia. But a credit utopia collapses. And it's not because of debt itself. Debt is just the shadow. Debt, as modern monetary theorists argue, can indeed be cleared as long as it cycles through once. What they miss is this. Because of unrestrained debt, real choice doesn't happen. And without rational allocation of resources, bad decisions just accumulate, like bugs piling up in a computer program, until they build up so much that they overwhelm the whole system, and then it collapses. It's not that collapse happens because of debt itself. It happens because wrong choices weren't corrected as they occurred. So if we return to the essence of money, we realize this. Money is ultimately about making choices socially and at the individual level, whether I become wealthy or remain poor. But for society as a whole, it's through constant selection, filtering out bad decisions from the endless stream of choices and leaving only the sound ones behind. That's the process. So it's not about just keeping ledgers and piling on debt indefinitely. Defaults have to happen constantly. Defaults must occur, companies must fail, and new growth must constantly emerge. That is, in fact, money's true function. What I've laid out here today, this isn't meant to advocate Bitcoin or to argue against it. It's not about that at all. It's about the monetary system we stand on, the financial money system itself, which is not what you intuitively assume. It's not that simple. It's full of flaws, and it's a highly artificial system. The monetary financial system we have now has many logical gaps, and that's why it's creaking. The question is whether Bitcoin can patch those logical flaws and make the system more complete. That's something we need to think carefully about. It's up to truly sharp macroeconomists to open their minds and consider the system Bitcoin may create and really reflect on it. Because the system we currently rely on is far too artificial and full of contrived loopholes. It may in fact be a system built on the assumption of a credit utopia, if you look closely. So it has drifted further and further from money's original function selection. That wasn't the original intention, but through how users behave, through all of us, it's been abused. After all, a world without bankruptcy sounds nice, doesn't it? A credit utopia sounds great, doesn't it? But what it really means is piling up every ledger. Those accumulated choices end up producing things like the Fed's balance sheet, this giant, distorted ledger. So the central bank's bloated balance sheet isn't just the choice of central bankers, it's the result of a collective dream, the wish of all economic actors, almost beyond human will, that gathers together and produces this strange variation of the system. And though remarkable, it's also a runaway train, unsustainable in the long run. That's it. That's all I can say. The world we live in right now isn't that solid, reliable house we think it is. That's the realization you may come to, and that's where you need to start. That's all for today. I know it was a difficult topic. Thank you for listening.